Hello everyone and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 243. Happy 4th of July, everybody. I hope you all had a fantastic day, and I hope that you all got to hang out with people you care about, barbecue, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. I hope you were able to do that today. As for me, I hung out pretty much all day at my parents' house with my pops, watched a little English Premier League soccer, ate some ribs, just nice local relaxation. Now my neighbors, on the other hand, they're still out there right now, lighting off quite the display. Place looks like Fallujah out there with all of the aerial bombs going off. And I'll tell you what, I ain't even mad about it. It's absolutely amazing to watch. These people are really doing a number on the sky right now. So if you hear some bangs and some booms and some pops during this podcast, that is exactly what's occurring. Now, on to our article for the night. Our article is from the New York Post, and the headline is, "The Questions That Still Need Answering About Jeffrey Epstein's Death." There might be one or two questions that linger, huh? The author of this piece is Isabel Vincent. Even before prosecutors announced they were likely shipping Ghislaine Maxwell to the scandal-plagued New York lockup where her pedophile pal Jeffrey Epstein died in custody last summer, alarm bells were pealing over her safety. It's a valid concern. 100%, without a question, it is a valid concern. She must be guarded like nobody has ever been guarded before. I am talking padded cell that they use for people that are suicide threats, people that might hurt themselves, and you could put her in one of those padded rooms, 24-hour surveillance, never a gap in shift change, none of it. This is way too important, and it reaches way too many levels for them to F up again. The way they shit the bed the first time is absolutely unacceptable. A second time, I don't even know what the reaction would be. "I'm absolutely worried for Ghislaine's safety," said Christopher Mason, a journalist and TV presenter who is appearing in Surviving Jeffrey Epstein, a Lifetime documentary series beginning next month. "I kind of don't believe he committed suicide. His death seemed exceedingly convenient for many." Boy, that's the understatement of the month, huh? Talk about a convenient death. Talk about a convenient time to go. And talk about some real powerful people thinking that they were going to be able to breathe a sigh of relief and just go on with their lives and never have to answer for what they have done. Well, they were wrong. And little did they know that 2020 would be the year that the predator turned into the prey. Those concerns are likely gripping Maxwell herself, according to a lawyer for some of Epstein's survivors who predicted that the perv financier, child abuser, co-conspirator, pedophile, would die in jail last year. It may be that she can't handle the fear of what's going to happen to her and takes matters into her own hands, or there will be people who are very afraid of what she has to say, said Spencer Cooven in an interview last week with the Daily Mail. She knows too much. Well, there's no doubt that she knows everything. She has the keys to where all the bodies are buried. She knows what skeletons, what closet the skeletons are in. And she has these dossiers, I would believe, at the very least, copies of some of this intelligence that they compiled on all of these people. Why do you think she was firing those shots across the bow with Indike and Khan and talking about how her emails were hacked? They were never hacked. I don't believe that for a minute. That was a threat to let everybody know that if she wasn't protected, that she was going to sing like a little bird. And if you don't think that Ghislaine Maxwell is ready to squeal like a little piggy to save herself and try and shave a few years off of her own sentence, you have not been paying attention to how these things work. She is facing serious charges, folks. And when the federal government is after you like this, the initial charges are never the only ones. Those are the initial charges. Get ready for an avalanche of RICO charges, because they are not far away, in my opinion. Epstein's apparent hanging in his cell on August 10th sparked a storm of controversy. Scandalous bungling at the Metropolitan Correction Center in Lower Manhattan included guards failing to watch him despite a previous failed suicide try just 2 weeks beforehand. Again, really? How does this even happen? How do you have this man with guards that obviously are not trained correctly, obviously don't know what they're doing, obviously have no supervision, and this is the place you put Jeffrey Epstein? Did these same guards ever do a shift watching El Chapo? And if not, why were they hired here or brought in here to watch Jeffrey Epstein? Something doesn't make sense with this whole entire thing with the guards either. There were also competing autopsy reports, with one suggesting that Epstein did not die by hanging, but was the victim of a homicide. And that was Dr. Michael Baden, who was brought in by Jeffrey Epstein's brother and the estate to take a look at the autopsy that was performed by the federal government and the state. Now, we have conflicting reports, right? Baden says one thing, the medical examiner says another, and it comes down to, who do you believe? Who has more credibility? Who has been doing this longer? And when you look at all of the evidence that's laid out before you, I would have to defer to what Michael Baden has to say in this situation, just on the premise that the man's been doing this for so long and he has been involved in so many high-profile cases. Meanwhile, we know that the state wants to control the narrative. We know that the state already looks terrible for letting Epstein get killed. They don't want to compound their problems. So, of course, they're going to say, well, he killed himself, all right? He didn't get killed in here. I mean, it's bad enough we let him kill himself, but man, imagine if it came out that Epstein was clipped inside of that jail. I mean, look, why do you put Nicholas Tartaglione in a jail cell with Jeffrey Epstein, a man who is looking at 3 life sentences because of murder? You put him in with Jeffrey Epstein. Whose bright idea was that? And do they still have a job? And if they do, how have they kept their job? Because guess what? They are incompetent and ridiculous at the best. At the worst, well, maybe they're complicit. So again, I don't want to just hear about these 2 guards that fell asleep. There's a whole bunch of people involved in that. Shift boss, his boss, their boss, that boss, this boss. Everybody who was involved needs to face serious questioning. More than a year after Epstein's death, it's still not clear what exactly happened to him in his cell the hours before he died. The events that preceded the death of Jeffrey Epstein were a perfect storm of screw-ups, said U.S. Attorney General William Barr. Again, talk about an understatement. And as far as William Barr goes in this case, I do not trust him either. Oh yeah, I saw the tape, just believe me. No, we're not believing that. This is too important of a case, filled with way too much BS, for us to just believe anything. We're going to need to see proof. You know, the stuff that, like, Virginia has provided against people like Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell and stuff, proof. The events that preceded the death, they actually began weeks before he was found unresponsive in his cell on the morning of August 10th, the date July 23rd at 1:27 a.m., when Epstein was found on the floor of his cell in a fetal position and with bruises around his neck in what authorities said was an attempted suicide. I don't believe that for a second. Sorry, I don't believe it. And they said that video footage, the camera wasn't directed at that cell at the time? Oh yeah, okay. His cellmate at the time, a former cop charged in a quadruple homicide, claimed to have saved his life when he alerted prison guards. Nicholas Tartaglione, 51, said through his lawyer that he had become good friends with Epstein and denied previous news reports that he had beaten him in their cell. So he alerted guards and tried to save his life. So he waited for him to be in the act of choking himself and killing himself before he alerted the guards. What did he want to just, see how long it would take, watch for a minute and then alert the guards? Wouldn't you stop him previously to him trying to hang himself by alerting the guards or physically restraining him if you had become such good friends with him, Nicholas Tartaglione? Whose idea was it and who made the call to put Tartaglione in that cell? Whoever that person is needs to answer some questions. Epstein was immediately placed on suicide watch on July 23rd, and by July 30th, that watch was moved to heightened psychological observation, which required that he have a cellmate and guards monitoring him every 30 minutes. Yeah, and that cellmate should have been a prison house snitch, a jailhouse snitch. They have them in every single lockup, every prison. One of the guys that works with the screws to make sure that he gets a little bit lighter treatment. Rats on people, gets put in a cell with somebody to try and extract some information, to try and watch somebody. You know, that's the kind of guy that should be in the cell with Jeffrey Epstein. Not Nicholas Tartaglione, one of the extras from The Sopranos. This guy looks like he was running around on Phil Leotardo's crew. Are you kidding me right now? But on August 9th, an unidentified cellmate was removed from Epstein's cell and transferred to another facility at 7:49 p.m. Tova Noel, a 31-year-old federal prison guard, returned Epstein to his cell after a meeting with one of his attorneys. So, on the 9th of August, somebody thought it would be a good idea to remove Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate, an unnamed cellmate at this point. Can we get the name of that person? Noelle had started work at 4 p.m. and was doing a double shift. She had already worked several overtime shifts at the prison that week, and by 10 p.m. she reported that the prisoners in 9 South, a special wing of the facility, which housed inmates in protective custody, were locked in their cells for the night. Noelle was supposed to conduct an inmate count, but surveillance video showed that she and another unidentified guard failed to do so. Oh, another unidentified guard. There sure are a lot of unidentified people here, huh? How can we confirm who any of these people are? And you just want us to believe your narrative. I am sorry, Attorney General William Barr, that shit is not going to work. Absolute garbage that you would even think that we're going to buy that nonsense and we're going to just believe whatever you guys tell us. Who are these unnamed people? Why are they not charged? Why have their names not been brought out into public? Who are any of these people? By midnight, Noelle was joined by Michael Thomas, 41, another prison guard. During the night, Noelle and Thomas surfed the internet and shopped for motorcycles and furniture, court documents say. Must be nice, motorcycles and furniture, huh? I don't remember ever sitting around and shopping for motorcycles and furniture while I've been at work, do you? Not even on the slowest nights. One, who has the money to sit around and shop for a new motorcycle? Was that something he planned on buying? Why insert that in the story if it doesn't mean anything? Again, we need more than just a scratch of the surface, folks. We need a full inquiry. And I don't mean an internal review. At 6:30 on the morning of August 10th, the guards discovered Epstein unresponsive in his cell when they went to take him a tray for breakfast. In the minutes before a call was placed to emergency responders, MCC staff tried to revive Epstein, according to the Bureau of Prisons. So if he was dead for so long, they said 7 hours perhaps, don't you think rigor mortis would have set in by then? So they're trying to revive a guy that has rig? I don't know, 7 hours enough? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know much about dead bodies. But I think you kind of know, wouldn't the body be getting a little cold, et cetera, et cetera? I don't know. It's all just so weird. It's all just so weird. Epstein was taken by ambulance to New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital by members of the FDNY and other emergency responders at about 7:30 a.m. So he was found at 6:30 a.m., but he wasn't taken from the cell for an hour. What in the hell was going on for that hour? As he lay on a gurney in his orange prison jumpsuit, seemingly lifeless, his pale, ashen face nearly matching the color of his white hair and surrounded by FDNY police and EMTs, New York Post photographer William Farrington snapped Epstein from a distance as an EMT used a purple breathing apparatus in an attempt to revive him. It just doesn't make sense to me. Again, I'm not a doctor or an EMT, and I've never worked on reviving anybody ever in my life. So perhaps I'm way off base here. But if somebody has been dead for that long, I mean, do you really think that the breathing apparatus is going to, pump some life back into him? You'd have to bring him to the Miracle Maker from A Princess Bride to have any hope, because this certainly isn't going to get the job done. The image shocked the world, showing the most notorious pedophile in modern history in the moments before his death. The photo immediately sparked conspiracy theories that Epstein had been felled by the powerful forces that wanted him silenced. An internet meme, "Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself," exploded on social media, and many observers noted that he had died less than a day after a tranche of more than 2,000 documents containing lurid testimony from his sex abuse victims, survivors, was unsealed in a case involving Maxwell. And yeah, look, we know that once these names were released, it was big trouble for Jeffrey Epstein and eventually, as we know now, Ghislaine Maxwell. But Jeffrey Epstein had a lot to hide. He knew a lot about people, and people were definitely shook by his death. So when we talk about the CIA and intelligence and the military complex, the industrial complex as a whole, and you look at the things they've been involved with throughout history, including things such as Unit 731 and bringing Nazi scientists within the fold and them paying no price for what they had done, all in the name of the greater good, supposedly, the means justifying the end, and you look at somebody getting clipped like Jeffrey Epstein and you put it above the intelligence services to protect themselves. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, right? I don't know. I don't have the answers here, folks. Just like I've told you from the beginning. I don't have the answers here. We're all navigating these choppy waters together. But what I will tell you is this. I do not put anything past the intelligence industry, the intelligence community at this point. And after all of these names came public, do you really think it's that beyond the pale that somebody would attempt to clip Jeffrey Epstein in prison or not? Maybe I'm just cynical, but I think it takes a very naive worldview to even think that the FBI or the CIA, more the CIA in my opinion, isn't capable of doing something like this, because they most certainly are as far as I can see it. As soon as the Federal Bureau of Prisons confirmed his death, the Justice Department announced an investigation by both the FBI and the Inspector General. Barr said he was appalled by the turn of events. And the Inspector General is Michael Horowitz, I believe, and we have seen his work as far as what he did with Russia, etc., etc. And I have to tell you, I am not very impressed with Mr. Horowitz, so I don't expect him to get to the bottom of this by any means or by any stretch of the imagination. Mr. Epstein's death raises serious questions that must be answered, he said. In addition to the FBI's investigation, I have consulted with the Inspector General, who is opening an investigation into the circumstances of Mr. Epstein's death. Within a day of those comments, the MCC prison warden, Lamine Ndiaye, was reassigned to a regional office pending the two investigations, and the two federal guards tasked with watching over Epstein were immediately placed on administrative leave. So basically, the only two people who really suffered were those two guards. In the whole entire Department of Justice, Bureau of Corrections, the only two people suffering are the two guards. Now, do I believe they should suffer some sort of penalty for their negligence? Of course. Were they involved in Jeffrey Epstein getting clipped? I don't know one way or the other. We don't have enough information. It's indeterminable at this point who was involved with what's going on at the jail. We have no information. In addition to the government probes into his death, Epstein's brother Mark hired former medical examiner Michael Baden to accompany the autopsy at the city's office of the medical examiner. Baden had briefly worked as New York's medical examiner in the late 1970s and led a panel that examined the assassination of President John F. Kennedy years earlier, and was often contracted by the families of victims who suspected foul play in their deaths. And well, remember, we also seen Baden on HBO. He had a show on HBO called Cold Case, I think it was. When I was younger, it was on all the time. I remember watching some of those episodes. And when I heard his name in this case, I referred back to that and I said, oh yeah, it's that guy from HBO. So then I did a little more research on him, and when you come down to him being credible, or the state of New York and the federal medical examiner, medical officer, why am I going to believe the medical officer? What has the state done to show me that I should believe them in this instance? Whereas Bodden is coming in, and this is a guy that knows what he's talking about. This guy brought up a lot of good points about the hyoid bone, etc., etc. So when I've looked at all the evidence, what's been provided thus far, for me, I much more believe Michael Bodden's account of what occurred. On August 16th, Barbara Sampson, the city's chief medical officer, said in a brief statement that following a careful review of all investigative information, including complete autopsy findings, that Epstein had committed suicide by hanging. And again, we saw none of that investigative work. We saw none of the notes. We saw none of how they got from point A to point B. It's just more of believe our narrative. But you have given us no reason to believe you, not only in this case, but in general. So why should we just believe what you are telling us? Months later, on October 30th, Bodden made his own explosive analysis public. He found that Epstein had suffered a number of injuries, including a broken bone in his neck, that are extremely and unusual in suicidal hangings and could occur much more commonly in homicidal strangulations, he said. And that was the hyoid bone, right? That is a very odd situation. When you start researching that and looking into it, well, you understand what Dr. Bodden was talking about. I think the evidence points to homicide rather than suicide, said Bodden, whose findings added fuel to the conspiracy theories that have been circulating for months. And again, folks, like I always say here, we always knew on this podcast, we've said it from the jump, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a cover-up, okay? And when you have a cover-up, you have to ask questions like this when something happens, because they've already proven they're not trustworthy. So why would we believe them when they say it's a suicide? I am not unwilling to believe it's a suicide, but I need to see evidence that points me in that direction. Just like in everything else in this case and everything else in life, I follow evidence. At a federal prison oversight hearing in November, shortly after Bodden's findings were made public, Senator John Kennedy, a Republican from Louisiana, said drywall Christmas ornaments and Epstein were three things that don't hang themselves. That's what the American people think, and they deserve some answers, he said. And he's not wrong. A majority of people don't buy the official story. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and asked me, Bobby, what's the real deal here? What's going on? We can't make heads or tails of this. Friends at functions, barbecues, etc., etc. Especially now, I'm getting hit up on a regular basis by friends, lifelong friends who had, knew about my podcast, but weren't really into the story, right? They had no idea what was going on, and they thought it was just another piece of work I was doing. But now, after the documentary, and after Ghislaine Maxwell being arrested, and things starting to come to light, people are starting to ask a whole lot of questions, and one thing that has become very apparent to me is nobody is buying the fact that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Barbara Sampson, the city's chief medical officer, disagreed. I stand firmly behind our determination of the cause and manner of death in this case, she told the New York Times. In general, fractures of the hyoid bone and the cartilage can be seen in suicide and homicides. The bone is near the Adam's apple, where Bodden said that Epstein suffered 3 fractures. Yes, of course, no doubt about it, but from violent hanging. Off of a beam, off of in the garage, off of something that you're going to jump. He leaned over from the second bunk, folks. You know what kind of tremendous force happens to is applied to your neck when you're actually hanging yourself, like in the old days, say they, when they would knock out the bench from under your feet and you would hang? That's how, during a hyoid bone gets broken, okay? Not how Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, supposedly. Bodden had found that the hyoid bone had been fractured in multiple places, and he insisted that the injuries were consistent with strangulation. On November 19th, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced the unsealing of an indictment charging Noel and Thomas with conspiring to make false records and to defraud the United States by impairing the lawful functions of the Metropolitan Correctional Center. That's all fine and well, but what about their bosses? What about the people above them? Who's the shift boss? The defendants had a duty to ensure safety and security of federal inmates in their care, said then U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman. That clown, that moron, anyone making a martyr of him is a fool. I am so glad he is out of this case. Instead, they repeatedly failed to conduct mandated checks on inmates and lied on official forms to hide their dereliction. Both Noel and Thomas pleaded not guilty, and their lawyers said that their clients were being made into scapegoats for mismanagement of the federal prison system that resulted in Epstein's death. I kind of agree with that. Again, I think that they should have some sort of penalty, but they shouldn't be the only ones getting charged here. They shouldn't be the only ones in trouble here, okay? Months after Epstein's death, new questions arose. In January, the FBI found that surveillance video taken from outside Epstein's cell during his first suicide attempt on July 23rd had been erased. Isn't that convenient? You mean when he was in the cell with Tartaglione and he supposedly tried to commit suicide and Tartaglione decided to wait until Epstein was already choking himself to intervene and then he was considered a hero for intervening afterwards and calling the guards? Is that what you mean? That's the footage we're missing? Oh, that's pretty convenient. Yeah, all right, I guess you're right. I'll just buy that. I'm just going to go with that. I'm not going to have any questions about that. Are you effing kidding me right now? What an absolute dumpster fire. Again, what about chain of custody? Who was supposed to be in charge of this evidence? How come they're not charged with Noel and Thomas? The MCC inadvertently preserved video from the wrong tier within the MCC, and as a result, video from outside the defendant's cell on July 22nd, 23rd, 2019 no longer exists, court papers say. Imagine if you would make some evidence disappear in a court case, in a trial. You imagine the trouble you would be in? But yet, this is the government for you. This is the federal government for you. Oh yeah, we just misplaced it. Yeah, we erased it. Sorry. We had a marathon of Friends coming on the old VHS and we had to tape over it. What in the hell is going on in these facilities? Furthermore, I don't want to hear shit about Maxwell being at MCC. She needs to go somewhere else. Somewhere that much more low-key. What happened to the video and what the explanation for the broken bones that Bodden found in Epstein's neck? Like Epstein before her, Maxwell, 58, is widely expected to name names and expose powerful captains of industry, world leaders, and even royalty in her defense. She, of all those people, knew who slept with whom and who was assigned to whom, said Mason. Maxwell, the youngest daughter of disgraced British press baron Robert Maxwell, faces 6 felony counts of child sex abuse in the indictment against her, which alleged that she schemed with Epstein and lied about trafficking women, some as young as 14, between 1994 and 1997. And again, these are not going to be the only charges. There is a RICO case coming her way like you would not believe, in my opinion. And once those RICO charges start coming, watch the roaches start to scurry, because at that point, all of these people are in serious jeopardy of criminal liability. The charges include alleged sex crimes in her London townhouse, where Prince Andrew has separately been accused by an Epstein survivor of sleeping with her multiple times beginning when she was 17. Although some are worried about Maxwell's detention at the same decrepit facility where Epstein died, at least one of her old friends isn't overly worried. Whatever happens to Ghislaine Maxwell, I hope there is justice for the survivors, said Christina Oxenberg, a writer and Serbian royal who has known Maxwell for years. I think the greater risk is that her connections work for her and she walks. Yeah, that's a zero risk there, Mrs. Oxenberg. She's not walking off of this. There's no chance. I have to be honest with you. I think that pressure must be exerted on New Mexico to also open some state charges and a state case against her at the same time here and run these concurrently, because there is something going on in New Mexico as well that really stinks from the head up. And I don't know exactly What it is, I can't really put my finger on it right now, but there is so much more going on in New Mexico, so much more that occurred in New Mexico that is being, I hate saying this word, but it's the truth. It's being covered up. And Ghislaine Maxwell is the key to all of this. And I have to believe that as we speak, her lawyers are pounding it into her that she needs to start naming names. She needs to turn government's witness, because no matter what, she's going to prison. If she gives up names, she might get some of her, some years shaved off. Or the judge might look at that when it's time for sentencing and give her, instead of 75 years, maybe only give her 50. But a person like Ghislaine Maxwell, her narcissism will not let her go down by herself. She's the kind of person that if she was sick on a life raft and she was going to die and it was one of those inflatable life rafts and you were on the raft with her, she's such a disgusting person, she would stab that life raft so you would die with her. That's the kind of self-serving person Ghislaine Maxwell is, in my opinion. So all of these people that have been named in the defamation suit with Virginia, all of these people who were engaging in financial crimes with Ghislaine Maxwell, and all of these other people who were enabling this crime trafficking ring, I hope they all understand that now the shoe is on the other foot. The survivors are going to be able to start sleeping at night. While you people are going to have some real serious bouts of insomnia. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. Inside of the description box, you will find all relevant links that have to do with this episode and the podcast. All right, everybody, we'll be back tomorrow morning and we'll do it all over again. Please, if you're out tonight, you are out tonight partying, having a good time, do not drink and drive. It is not worth it. All right, everybody, until tomorrow.